What do you do when you feel attacked from every side? When fear tightens its grip on your chest? When envy from others weighs heavily on your shoulders? When temptations swirl around your mind? Or when a darkness you cannot explain presses against your soul? These attacks are real, and they do not always come from what you see. Sometimes they strike in silence, in sleepless nights, in confusion that clouds your thoughts, in discouragement that steals your peace. In those moments you may feel weak, exposed and defenseless, but heaven has not left you without protection. At the very heart of God's plan, there stands a warrior who has never lost a battle, the Prince of the heavenly host, Saint Michael the Archangel. Saint Michael is not a symbol of the past. He is a present defender of every soul that calls upon him. The same Archangel who once cast the dragon down from heaven now draws near to fight for you. His flaming sword shines with the justice of God, and his cry, "Who is like God?" strikes terror into the enemy who seeks to harm you. When you invoke his name, you are not simply reciting a prayer. You are placing yourself under the shield of one who carries divine authority. You are asking the leader of God's armies to stand between you and every attack, to guard your family, your home, your body, and your soul. This is why prayer to Saint Michael is urgent. It is not something to postpone until tomorrow. The enemy does not wait to strike, and so you must not wait to call upon heaven. Tonight is the moment to raise your voice, to join your prayer to the battle cry of the Archangel, and to claim the protection that God has already prepared for you. Do not let fear convince you that you are alone. You are defended, you are guarded, you are protected by the one whom God himself appointed to fight for his people. The reality of invisible attacks. Not every attack comes with visible wounds or clear enemies. Some are hidden, creeping silently into your life until you suddenly realize how heavy your heart feels. You may not see a sword raised against you, yet you feel the sting of envy from those who wish you harm. You may not face open conflict, yet you sense the shadow of resentment and malice pressing against your spirit. Invisible attacks are often the most dangerous because they disguise themselves as ordinary struggles, and you begin to believe they are simply part of life. But in truth, these unseen battles have a spiritual origin. St. Paul warns us in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against rulers, authorities, and powers of darkness. When sudden discouragement overwhelms you, when confusion clouds your mind, when temptation grows stronger than usual, when fear comes without reason, these may not be random moments. They may be signs that the enemy has set his sights upon you. These invisible attacks can strike in many forms. For some, they come as anxiety that steals sleep and peace. For others, as division in the home that arises without cause. For still others, as a heavy sense of hopelessness that lingers without explanation. The enemy delights in using these subtle weapons because they are harder to recognize, harder to fight, and easier to dismiss as something natural. Yet the moment you recognize that your struggles are not only physical or emotional, but also spiritual, you gain strength. You realize that you are not imagining things, and more importantly, that you are not fighting alone. For every invisible attack, there is an invisible defender. And above them all stands Saint Michael, the Archangel appointed by God to fight against the powers of darkness. How evil works in subtle ways. The enemy rarely begins his attacks with thunder and lightning. More often he works in whispers, slipping into the cracks of daily life, disguising himself as your own thoughts, your own fears, your own weaknesses. He does not always strike with visible violence, but weaves lies that sound almost like truth, planting seeds of doubt, pride, anger, or despair. This is his greatest weapon, subtlety. He hides in what appears small until the small grows heavy enough to break your spirit. Think of how easily he works in silence. A sudden thought that you are not loved. A quiet voice suggesting that you are worthless. a fleeting temptation that promises comfort but leaves you empty. These moments may seem insignificant, but they accumulate link by link, forming the chains of oppression. The devil delights in using what looks harmless to weaken the soul until the weight becomes unbearable. He also thrives in division. He stirs conflict between friends, discord within families, and envy in workplaces. A misunderstanding grows into resentment, a disagreement becomes bitterness, and soon hearts that once stood together are pushed apart. Pride keeps reconciliation away, and in that distance evil feeds. This is how he works, subtle, patient, always waiting for the opportunity to deepen the wound. Yet awareness is the beginning of victory. When you understand that not every thought comes from you, that not every weight is natural, you can begin to resist. St. Peter warns in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy the devil prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour." To be alert is to recognize his tactics, to refuse his lies, and to guard your soul with prayer. Saint Michael is the warrior who unmasks these deceptions. Where the enemy hides, Michael reveals. Where lies are whispered, Michael proclaims truth. Where division festers, Michael fights for unity. This is why invoking him is so powerful, because in a world filled with subtle attacks, you need the clear, resounding strength of heaven's defender to cut through the enemy's schemes. The identity and mission of Saint Michael. At the heart of every battle stands a warrior, and for the people of God, that warrior is Saint Michael the Archangel. His name is not merely a title, but a proclamation, Mikael, who is like God. With this cry, he reminds all creation that no force of darkness, no enemy of the soul, no power of hell can rival the Almighty. His identity is inseparable from his mission, to defend God's people, to cast down the enemy, and to lead the hosts of heaven in the eternal battle for truth. In Revelation chapter 12, verse 7 to 9, we read of the great war in heaven when Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon, who is the ancient serpent, the devil, was not strong enough and was cast down to the earth. This is not only a story of the past, it is the pattern of Michael's mission throughout time. The one who cast down the enemy then continues to defend souls now, striking against the same darkness that seeks to harm you. The Church calls him the Prince of the Heavenly Host, the Protector of Israel, and the Guardian of Christians. His sword burns with the justice of God, and his very presence is a terror to demons. Where he is invoked, darkness flees. Where he stands guard, the enemy cannot advance. Where his name is spoken with faith, chains begin to fall. But his mission is not abstract. It is personal. He fights not only for the Church as a whole, but for each soul entrusted to God. He defends your home, your family, your mind, your heart. He is heaven's warrior who stands between you and the forces that seek your destruction. His mission is rooted in God's love, for God desires that no soul be lost, and Michael's role is to guard you so that you may remain safe within that love. When you pray to Saint Michael, you are not calling upon a distant angel of legend. You are calling upon a present defender, a commander of God's armies, who acts now as he has always acted, with unwavering strength, total obedience to God, and unfailing protection for those who trust in his intercession. The cry, "Who is like God?" Every time Saint Michael raises his voice in battle, he proclaims his name, and his name itself is a weapon, Mikael, which means, "Who is like God?" This is not a question waiting for an answer. It is a declaration, a cry that shakes heaven and earth. It is a reminder to every creature that no one, not even the proudest angel who rebelled, can ever compare to the power, majesty, and authority of the Almighty. When Lucifer rose in arrogance, declaring that he would exalt himself above God, it was St. Michael who stood firm with this cry. He did not boast of his own strength. He did not claim power for himself. Instead, He reminded all creation that only God reigns supreme. This is why his name is terror to demons. Every time it is proclaimed, pride is struck down, lies are silenced, and evil is reminded of its defeat. In your own life, this cry becomes a shield. When you are tempted to believe the enemy's lies, that you are abandoned, that you are worthless, that your struggles are stronger than God, remember Michael's name. Speak it as he does. Who is like God? No despair can overpower his mercy. No fear can overshadow his presence. No chain can resist his power. The very name of Michael calls your soul back to trust, lifting your gaze away from your weakness and fixing it on God's greatness. Every prayer to Saint Michael joins in this eternal cry. When you say, "Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle," you are echoing his proclamation that God alone is victorious. And with each echo, the darkness trembles, because it knows it cannot endure where God is exalted. So take this cry as your own. Let it rise in moments of temptation, in hours of fear, in seasons of trial. Say it aloud, "Who is like God?" Let your soul be strengthened by the same cry that once cast down the dragon, the cry that still resounds through heaven and earth, the cry that will protect you when you feel attacked and remind you that God is and always will be greater than all evil. Why you cannot fight alone. One of the greatest deceptions the enemy whispers into the heart is the belief that you are strong enough to face him on your own. He convinces you that you can endure without prayer, resist without grace, overcome without God. But this is a lie, and it is a dangerous one. On your own, you are fragile. On your own, you are vulnerable. Against powers of darkness that have existed since before humanity's first breath, human strength is not enough. This is why God, in his infinite mercy, surrounds us with his angels and saints, and why he commands Saint Michael to stand at the forefront of our defense. Consider the words of Christ in John chapter 15, verse 5. "Apart from me, you can do nothing." These words are not meant to discourage, but to teach the truth, that victory over evil is possible only when we remain in God. The devil knows this, and so he seeks to isolate you, to make you feel alone, abandoned, and weak, because a soul that does not call upon God is a soul exposed to attack. Yet the moment you invoke the Lord, the moment you call upon his angels, the battle shifts, because you are no longer fighting with human strength, but with divine power. Saint Michael does not act apart from God. He acts in God's name. When you call upon him, you are uniting yourself to heaven's armies. You are admitting that you cannot win by yourself, and in that humility, God's power becomes your strength. The proud fall because they refuse help, but the humble stand because they accept it. Do not believe the lie that asking for Saint Michael's intercession is weakness. It is wisdom. Just as a soldier does not enter battle alone, so too the soul should never face spiritual attacks without the protection God has already provided. Saint Michael was created for this mission, to defend you, to guard you, to fight where you cannot. Trust him, invoke him, and know that when you do, you are never alone. Saint Michael as guardian of the Church and families. From the beginning, the Church has recognized Saint Michael as her protector, the one who guards the bride of Christ against the assaults of the enemy. In every age, whenever darkness has risen to threaten the faith, the Church has turned to Michael's protection, invoking him as the defender who stands watch at her gates. Popes, saints, and the faithful throughout history have prayed the prayer to Saint Michael because they knew that the battle is not only personal, but also communal. The enemy does not only attack individuals, he attacks families, parishes, and the entire body of Christ. Consider how often families become the battlefield. Where there should be unity, division enters. Where there should be peace, conflict arises. Where there should be love, coldness, or resentment grows. These are not always natural struggles, but signs of the enemy's attempts to dismantle what God has built. For this reason, invoking Saint Michael over families is a shield of protection. a call for heaven to guard the home as a sanctuary of faith, hope, and love. Saint Michael is also the protector of children and the vulnerable. Countless parents have entrusted their little ones to his care, asking him to stand at their side in school, in friendships, in moments of weakness or fear. He watches over the innocent with a strength that no darkness can overcome. In this way, every family that turns to him discovers a heavenly guardian who fights not only for the Church Universal, but for the small domestic churches, the homes where love is meant to flourish. Imagine your home covered by the wings of Saint Michael, his flaming sword guarding the entrance, his presence filling every room with light. This is not fantasy, but faith, for angels are real, and their mission is active. When you call upon him, you invite his protection not only over yourself, but over those you love most. And under his shield, the enemy cannot prevail. Biblical foundation for angelic protection. The protection of angels is not a pious imagination, but a truth deeply rooted in Scripture. From the earliest pages of the Bible to its final vision, angels appear as defenders, messengers, and guardians of God's people. In Psalm 91, verse 11, the promise is clear. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. This is not poetic symbolism, it is divine assurance that heaven's armies are sent to stand beside those who trust in the Lord. In the book of Daniel, chapter 10, the prophet describes how an angelic messenger was delayed by the prince of Persia, a spiritual adversary, until Michael, one of the chief princes, came to his aid. Here we see Michael already revealed as the one who fights not only for Israel but for the unfolding of God's plan in history. In Revelation chapter 12, Michael reappears at the climax of salvation's story, leading the heavenly hosts to cast down the dragon, the ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan. These passages show us that Michael's mission spans across time, defending God's people from generation to generation. Even Christ himself spoke of angelic guardianship. In Matthew chapter 18, verse 10, he declares that the little ones have angels in heaven, who always behold the face of the Father. In Gethsemane, as he faced his passion, he reminded Peter that he could call upon more than 12 legions of angels if he wished. The presence and power of angels is woven into the fabric of salvation history, and at the forefront of this angelic mission stands Michael. This is why invoking Saint Michael in prayer is not superstition but obedience to the truth of Scripture. God has given his people defenders, and Michael is the chief among them. When you pray to him, you are not creating your own shield. You are stepping into the protection God has already established for his church and his children. Testimony or reflective example of protection. Picture a man who for weeks could not sleep. Each night, he felt an unexplained heaviness pressing down on him. His mind was restless, filled with anxious thoughts, and his heart trembled with fear he could not name. Doctors found no cause, and friends dismissed it as stress. But deep inside, he knew he was under attack. One night, desperate for peace, he remembered the prayer to Saint Michael and spoke it aloud with trembling faith. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. As the words left his lips, the atmosphere shifted. The fear lifted, the heaviness broke, and for the first time in weeks he slept in peace. The battle had not been imagined, it was real, and the victory came through the intercession of heaven's warrior. Or think of a mother who prayed daily for her family. She noticed increasing conflict in her home, arguments flared over nothing, peace dissolved into tension, and unity seemed to be slipping away. Recognizing that her family was being targeted, she began to invoke Saint Michael each day, asking him to guard her home. Slowly the conflicts lessened, conversations softened, and peace returned. She knew that what had threatened to destroy her family was cast out because the Archangel stood watch over her house. These are not isolated stories. They echo the experience of countless believers throughout centuries who have turned to Saint Michael in times of fear, oppression, or danger. Each one discovered the same truth. When the battle seems overwhelming, when attacks feel unbearable, invoking Saint Michael brings strength and deliverance. His mission is timeless because evil does not rest, but neither does he. If you have felt defenseless or powerless under attack, know that you too can experience this protection. Saint Michael fights for you as he has fought for many before you. Call on him with faith, and you will not stand alone. Signs: you are under attack. Not every trial in life is a spiritual attack, but there are moments when the weight you feel cannot be explained by ordinary causes. Recognizing the signs helps you to respond not with despair, but with prayer. One sign is confusion that clouds your mind and steals your peace. You try to think clearly, but everything feels heavy, disordered, and unsettled. Another sign is sudden discouragement, when tasks that once brought joy now feel impossible, and hope fades without reason. There are also temptations that grow unusually strong, pressing you in areas of weakness you thought were already overcome. Old wounds resurface, past sins try to reclaim ground, and you feel as though the battle is intensifying. Division is another sign. When relationships break down quickly, conflicts erupt without cause, and unity feels unreachable. Sometimes it is a deep sense of heaviness that lingers day and night, like a shadow following you wherever you go. The devil rarely announces his attacks openly. Instead, he tries to convince you that these struggles are only your imagination, or worse, that they are proof of your failure. But St. Paul reminds us in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11, that we are not unaware of the enemy's schemes. To recognize the signs is to take the first step toward victory. If you notice these patterns, do not ignore them. Do not accept them as your new reality. They are signals that it is time to raise your prayer, to call upon God's protection, and to invoke the intercession of Saint Michael. For where he enters, confusion gives way to clarity, fear to courage, division to unity, and despair to hope. The signs of attack are not signs of defeat. They are signs that heaven is ready to fight for you. Why prayer is the shield against attacks. When the enemy presses hard, when temptations surge, and when fear weighs upon the heart, there is one weapon that never fails: prayer. Prayer is not simply speaking words into the air. It is the soul's direct contact with God, the opening of a channel through which grace descends and protection surrounds. It is the shield that covers the believer when all else seems weak. St. Paul in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 18, urges us to pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. He places prayer at the center of the armor of God because it is what activates every other defense. Prayer is powerful because it humbles us before the Lord, admitting that we cannot win alone. It draws God's strength into our weakness, His light into our darkness, His order into our chaos. When you pray, you are not merely speaking, you are entering into the very presence of the Almighty, who commands His angels to act on your behalf. And when you specifically invoke Saint Michael, you are calling upon the warrior God has appointed to strike down the enemy. Think of prayer as the shield raised in battle. Without it, the fiery arrows of the evil one strike unhindered. With it, they are extinguished before they can cause harm. This is why the enemy tries so hard to keep you from praying. He distracts you, convinces you it is useless, or tempts you to delay. But every prayer spoken with faith, no matter how simple, is a weapon that shakes the enemy's grip and draws the protection of heaven closer to you. If you feel attacked, do not remain silent. Speak, pray. Call upon God with urgency and invoke Saint Michael with confidence. For the one who prays is never defenseless, and the one who raises prayer becomes untouchable under the shield of divine protection. The urgency of praying now. The greatest mistake in the face of attack is delay. The enemy does not wait. He presses forward with persistence, seeking every opening, every moment of hesitation. If you say, "I will pray tomorrow," he will strike tonight. If you say, "I am too tired," he will use your weariness as a weapon. If you say, "I can handle this alone," he will convince you that you are stronger than you are, only to weaken you further. Delay is his ally, but urgency is your shield. In 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 2, St. Paul proclaims, "Now is the day of salvation." Not tomorrow, not next week, but now. Every moment of prayer delays the enemy's schemes and invites God's protection. Every time you invoke St. Michael, heaven responds. This is why it is not enough to think of prayer as something optional, something to be done only when convenient. In times of attack, prayer must be immediate, fervent, and unshaken. Imagine a soldier on the battlefield who sees the arrows flying but refuses to raise his shield until later. Would he not fall quickly? So it is with the soul who postpones prayer, but the one who raises prayer instantly with urgency and faith discovers that the arrows lose their strength before they even touch him. Tonight, as you hear these words, you are faced with a choice. Will you remain unguarded, waiting for another time? Or will you lift your heart now, calling upon the warrior who has never lost a battle? The urgency of prayer is not born of fear, but of wisdom. It is the recognition that God's protection is always near, but must be sought with trust and immediacy. Do not wait. Pray now, and let St. Michael surround you with the shield of heaven. The prayer moment, invoking St. Michael. Now let us enter into the very heart of this moment. Prayer is not distant theory, but living action. And tonight you are invited to lift your voice with faith, to call upon the Archangel whom God himself appointed as defender of his people. Close your eyes, silence every distraction, and let these words rise from your heart with conviction. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do you, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God. Cast into hell Satan and all evil spirits who prowl about the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. This prayer, prayed by countless believers through the centuries, is not merely tradition, it is a weapon. Every word carries the authority of heaven. When you invoke Saint Michael, you are calling the leader of God's armies to stand beside you, to draw his sword of light against the darkness pressing upon your life. Speak this prayer aloud when you feel afraid, when temptation grows heavy, when your home feels unsettled. Speak it over your family, over your work, over every corner of your life. But tonight, let us expand the cry of our hearts. Saint Michael, warrior of light, I entrust to you my body, my soul, my home, and my loved ones. Guard us from all evil, protect us from every attack of the enemy. Break the chains of fear and despair and surround us with the peace of God. By your intercession, may Christ's victory be manifest in my life tonight and always. Remain in this moment. Let the words echo in your soul. Feel the strength of heaven surrounding you, the fear lifting, the peace of God filling the space once occupied by darkness. This is the power of prayer. It transforms the battlefield into holy ground where victory is certain. Assurance of protection after prayer. When you have prayed with faith, you must also believe that heaven has heard you. Prayer is never wasted breath, never an echo fading into emptiness. It is a living act that rises before the throne of God, and through Saint Michael's intercession, it becomes a command carried out by the armies of heaven. If you have invoked his name tonight, you are not defenseless. The Archangel stands beside you, and the forces of darkness tremble at his presence. Do not expect always to feel an instant change, for the enemy may still attempt to whisper lies, telling you nothing has happened. But the truth is not built on feelings, it is grounded in faith. God is faithful to his promises, and Saint Michael never abandons those who call upon him. Even when the storm continues to rage, you are shielded beneath his protection. Even when fear tries to return, his sword remains raised in your defense. Take courage, for you are not alone. Psalm 34 verse 7 assures us that the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. That angel is not far away. He surrounds you now. The chains that once bound you are weakening. The confusion that clouded you is clearing, and the weight that pressed on your soul is lifting. Walk in confidence from this prayer, knowing that the victory does not depend on your strength, but on God's power, carried into battle by his warrior. When you feel the temptation to fear again, remind yourself of this truth. I am protected. Saint Michael fights for me. God's angels surround me. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. Hold on to this assurance, and let it be your peace in the days to come. Closing blessing and invitation to persevere. Now receive this blessing as a seal upon your soul. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, may the protection of heaven rest upon you. May your mind be guarded from confusion, your heart be preserved from fear, and your spirit be strengthened in hope. May Saint Michael the Archangel stand at your side in every battle, raising his sword against the powers of darkness, and shielding you with the light of God's presence. May your home be a dwelling of peace, your family a sanctuary of unity, and your steps guided each day by divine grace. But remember, protection is not a single moment. It is a way of life. The battle between light and darkness does not end with one prayer, and so you must remain steadfast. Persevere in invoking Saint Michael daily, even when you do not feel attacked. Build the habit of covering yourself, your loved ones, and your home under his guard. Just as soldiers never put down their armor in the midst of war, neither should you let your shield of prayer fall. The enemy will try to discourage you, to make you doubt that your words matter, to convince you that you are wasting time. Do not believe him. Every prayer strengthens the walls of your defense. Every invocation calls upon the armies of heaven, and every cry of faith weakens the hold of darkness. The more you persevere, the stronger you become, not in yourself, but in God who acts through his angels. So carry this blessing with you. Live each day with the assurance that you are never abandoned, never unprotected, never left to fight alone. Saint Michael fights for you, guards you, and will never leave your side as long as you call upon him. Persevere and you will see victory after victory, for the one who stands under the shield of God cannot be overcome.